Hello everyone, I'm back and this is gonna be, I think it's part 10 of the knitting process series where I am making this sweater. If you want the pattern, it's all linked below. You can go buy it from Andrea. And I'm knitting it up and I'm sharing the knitting process, which isn't like step-by-step how I knit something or any sort of knitting tutorial, but what it is talking everyone through all the decisions that get made along the way, all the thought, modifications, calculations, everything that happens during the knitting process, specifically for this sweater, but for sweaters or garments in general. So if you go back in the playlist, you'll see we go right from, swatching, determining the size, finding the right yarn, needles, everything, all the way through to where we are right now, which is 12 days after we started knitting. We are now finished the body completely and we're ready to start on the next step. And again, it's not a step-by-step tutorial and there's no production value in this. Don't do any editing, but where we're at right now is I am into my second ball of my main color. So this is the Frosted Stitches non-superwash Nordic DK base. She's a local dyer here in Ontario, Canada. And this is the rest of the main color I have. It's almost a full skein, but I'm at that point, as I get to with almost every project, where I'm getting nervous about playing yarn chicken. And yarn chicken, for people who don't know, is when you feel like you might possibly run out of your yarn. So what my plan is, and I talked about it a little bit at the end of the last video, but this whole video is going to be dedicated to me figuring out if I'm going to be losing at yarn chicken or not, because I actually love math. So I have no problem with this, but talking it through can hopefully help other people get confidence to understand whether or not they're going to be playing yarn chicken and how I at least go through that thought process. So normally once you finish the body, usually you do the sleeves next. And then, you might do, there's pockets here. And then there's this band. So let me pull up actually on my whip here, my work in progress. So it's the first time that I've been able to actually put it on my body. I did put a couple stories up on Instagram today. That's where I do most of my in progress shots. But what it looks like now is a sort of weird boxy vest. Like this. But what I'm going to do, because I'm worried about running out of this color here, which is called Angst, by the way, from her Grunt collection. It's all linked below. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to actually do that button band first, because that's what's going to take up the majority of this yarn. So that way I can figure out, depending on how much I take up on the button band, whether or not I'm going to include these stripes in the stripes for the sleeve and what I'm going to do with the cuffs of the sleeve and things like that. But first and foremost, I want to make sure I have enough for the button band. And so the way that this pattern is constructed, the button band's going to come up and around. So my plan, which I'm going to do here, at least part of it, and I do have my little pause feature that I know is super low tech for most people, but I just got it on my iPhone. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually measure how long this button band is going to be, kind of roughly. I'm literally just taking my measuring tape and going like generally around where it's going to be. I know what the pattern says, but I like to have it for myself as well. And again, I'm not sharing pattern details in this. So I got to 60 plus about 2 inches. So 62 inches roughly. But again, I don't want my band to be too loose or too tight and be like really pulling everything sort of tighter. So I'm going to say, on the safe side, I'm going to say 64 inches. Maybe I'll add a couple inches for my button band. And so what I'm going to do, and I did bring a little piece of paper along so I could do this, and I'm just going to kind of draw the shape of it informally. And I'm going to say we want that to be around 64 inches. So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to weigh. I've got my kitchen scale here. This one's a cheapo from Canadian Tire for people who are in Canada, but I'm sure you get stuff at Walmart, things like that. Pretty inexpensive and good enough for yarn. And I'm going to measure it. So there's exactly 100 grams. I say ooh because that's what the skein was supposed to weigh, which means it was a little more than 100 grams, which I love. Because I have used about half of one of these stripes all the way around the body, which came out of this skein. So there was more than 100 grams there. So if we're starting at 100 grams, I'm going to start knitting the button band. And again, I'm not putting buttons on it. That is a feature that I've decided because I never actually close up buttoned things anyways. So I'm going to just use a shawl pin if I actually want to keep it closed, but in general, just probably let it be open. So I'm going to start knitting that, and I will do it in this video so that we can see the math afterwards. Then I'm going to weigh it again. I'm going to measure it and weigh it and then use that to kind of extrapolate, if you will, if we want to get fancy with math words, extrapolate what the actual amount of yardage or weight that I'll use on that, on the button band to see where I'm going to land, just for peace of mind. Like, it's literally just for me to feel good about it. So I'm going to write the word start here so I can remember that. It starts at 100 grams and I want it to go 64 inches. Okay, so what that means is, before I actually pause, just because people seem to like to see some of these steps, again, not knitting tutorials, but I do have my needles here. I'm using ChowGoo interchangeable set, and I'm on my ribbing needle, which is, for this project, a 3.75 millimeter. So I'm going to just do my slip knot, and I'll show you just a couple cast ons. Again, this is the most standard long tail cast on, just for people who like to see some stitches. But what I can do once I do the math is I'll be able to also see if I maybe just want to make the button band not quite so wide. And that will help me also decide. So I'm going to do some of this button band, and then I'm going to come back and we'll measure it and we'll do that math. Okay, we are back. And what I've done is just to get a sense of, can I estimate whether or not I'm going to lose a yarn chicken? Am I going to run out of yarn before I'm finished? I'm taking this portion of the button band, which, let me double check, but I believe it to be 4 inches. Yeah. So this is 4 inches of button band, and I'm going to now weigh on my scale how much yarn is left. Okay, so there's 94 grams left. So I'm just going to write it down so that later I don't have to interpret it. I'm going to say after 4 inches of band, we have 94 gram remains. Okay. So, I don't like the sounds of that, first of all, just mathy wise. Okay, so I started with 100. And yes, I could do this in my head, but I'm going to do it on the calculator, the giant iPad calculator, minus the 94 that we have left. That means we used around 6 grams for 4 inches. So 6 grams over 4 inches, I'm going to take that 6, divide it by 4 inches. So we've got 1.5 grams being used for each inch because there's 6 grams being used for 4 inches. That means each inch here is using up 1.5 grams. Okay. Now, instead of going over 1 inch, I want to see what does that mean when I go across 64 inches, which is what my button band is going to be. So now I'm going to multiply that 1.5 grams per inch times 64 inches. That gives me 96 grams total. So the entire button band, right, all the way around 64 inches, knowing that after 4 inches I'd use 6 grams, becomes 96 grams. So let me write that down. So I'm going to say 4 inches used 6 grams of yarn. So 64 inches equals 96 grams of yarn. Okay. And again, this is not going to be exact because I don't have a scale that's going down to like decimal points of grams or anything. And doing it just by weight is a rough estimate. Doing it by yardage would be a better estimate, but would take a way, way, way longer to do. So I'm just going to write 1.5 grams per inch, just so I remember. So right now, to play yarn chicken with this, I have 100 grams total. I need 96 grams of that for my button band, which would mean I could do it. It would be close, but I would be able to do it. I would probably be able to finish this button band in this color. But it would mean the sacrifice that I would need to make for that, so I'm just moving everything around aimlessly, would be that my sleeves and my sleeve cuffs wouldn't have any of this pink color or angst color, which is kind of like a burgundy, which may be fine. I'm sure it would look nice with a different, if the sleeve cuffs were different from this, I'm sure that would be fine. The most important thing to me is that my button band is actually this color, because that's what I want kind of around my skin, around my neck and stuff like that. I don't want it to be a different color, especially because it joins up here, right? It's going to start here. So what I would really like to do would be to get to a point where either I just know I'm going to need another skein of this yarn, and then I go and ask Christa from the Frosted Stitch really nicely if it's possible she could dye me up another skein of it, which would be fine. However, I get really stubborn when it comes to yarn chicken, and I don't like to bug people as well. So the other thing I'm considering right now is see how wide this is? It's this wide because it wants you to be able to put buttons on. But remember, I'm not doing buttons. So I'm considering, how would this look if I made it 2/3 the size? So instead of it being this wide, which let me measure it, and I know it'll probably stretch out a little bit because it's ribbing. It'll stretch out when I block it. But right now it's 2.75 inches, let's say. And what if I took it down to like even just 2 inches? 2 inches wide. I think that would still be more than wide enough to look nice. So let's knock off about that much of it. And it would still feel nice because it would still be a wide enough band to get around, and it would sit pretty much the same, I would say. Plus I don't plan to button, so I won't really be overlapping too much, but it's still enough to overlap. So if I do that, let's factor that into the calculation. Okay, this is where it's just math on math on math. And I think there's a lot of people with similar brains to me, analytical, rational, mathematical brains, who do enjoy knitting for this exact reason. But here's what I'm going to say. Okay, so that was 2.75 inches wide. If I do it 2 inches wide instead of 2.75, then I'll be making it 72% as wide, which means I should use 72% of the total yardage or weight. So if I take that 72% of the 96 grams I think I'm going to need, if I do it full length, that means I would only use probably close to 70 grams out of the 100 grams, which would leave me with 30 grams left. And to me, 30 grams left sounds great for me being able to at least do the cuffs and maybe even some of the stripes on the sleeve. Now, it makes me then want to say, well, will that be enough? So if I say, I got to write all this down or I'm going to forget it. I'm going to say band width 2 inches equals 70 grams used for band. So then I want to try to figure out from there, what do I think, how many grams do I think I'm going to use for my cuffs of my sleeves? So knowing that this is 4 grams and the cuffs are only supposed to be, they're not supposed to be as thick as this. So even if I say I do it as maybe just 2-inch cuffs, which would be fine, I would say I'm probably going to need twice this. And this is, again, remember, this is 6 grams. So twice of this for one band, twice of this for another band. So 6, 12, 24. So I have 30 grams left, and I'll use around 24 grams on the cuffs. I don't need any for the pocket. Even if I do the pocket liner in pattern, the pocket will only go, sorry, I'm pointing at things that aren't here. This pocket will only go to here. So if I did it in pattern, I don't actually need any of the pink color or burgundy color. I just need these 4 colors. So that should be fine. So really, I would still have leftover. If I make this only 2 inches wide, in theory, I would still have leftovers to do the cuffs at least 2 inches wide. No problem. And let's not forget that I have 2 swatches, which I don't have down here to put in front of you. But I have 2 swatches of material. One is about this big that could for sure do a stripe or 2. So I would actually even feel confident putting 1 pink stripe on each sleeve probably. And if not, I can just rip the sleeves back and take the pink stripes out of the sleeves themselves. So this is a really long-winded way of showing you how my brain works. When I get the inkling, I get the little spidey sense that says, you know what, I think I might run out of yarn and I don't want to buy more yarn. It would be very different if the yarn wasn't so special. But this is so dang special. It is indie dyed by an Ontario dyer in small batches. It's a beautiful base. It's non-superwash, which is harder to find in commercial yarns sometimes. And it's an expensive investment too. This type of yarn isn't like you go and buy it for $5 at a Michael's or a Walmart or something. So if it was different yarn, I might just go out and grab another skein, no problem. Or bug her. I know I can bug her if I really do end up needing more. But between my 2 swatches that I have, one of which is big and one of which is like a half size, and just redoing this math a little bit, just by making it not so wide, I think we're going to be golden. I think I'm going to be just as happy with it. And so that's my decision. And this was, again, they always turn into really long videos. I hope you're learning something or finding some enjoyment in listening to the goings on of my brain, which you probably aren't. But nonetheless, I'm excited because I'm going to do this band and then I'm going to start on my sleeves. And that's going to be super exciting. Then whatever's left over is going to end up being in my pocket. And remember, at the very least, I have another skein of this Kurt color, which is this sort of greenish gold, beautiful, grungy, rusty colorway that's perfect for this sweater. So at the very least, I can use that as my pocket liner and just have a nice pop of gold inside the pocket. Anyways, I've talked this to death now. This is how it goes when you're playing Yarn Chicken. So I am really pumped to get going on this and keep chugging through. It's supposed to get really hot here. Again, for people watching later in life, this is June in Ontario, Canada. So this is getting on really hot season for us. And also nice long daylight hours. So it may mean less knitting time if it's super hot because I get really, really hot and I want to just cool down. And sometimes using wool sweaters and knitting those isn't the way to do that. But I really like the momentum I've had on this so far. There have been several days I haven't worked on it at all, but mostly I've been chipping away at it day by day. And it's been 12 days to do the body. And I think that's pretty excellent progress. So thanks for joining in. Please go ahead and check out the rest of the playlist if you want to continue to see this sweater unfold. And I hope you've learned something useful, or you can comment below and tell me how you deal with yarn chicken concerns. Bye.